I welcome everybody back to the Writer's Parachute, where we are guiding author and writer dreams to a perfect landing. And today we have a very special guest with us. She is a poet, she is a writer, she is a CEO of a real estate company, and she's a marathon runner and so many more things. I could go on and on. The list goes on forever. We have with us today Carmen Micsa. Sorry about that, Carmen. And we're going to be talking to her today about two of her books, Morsels of Love and PR, the Poetics of Running. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and do the housekeeping we always start off with. So, of course, we would like for you to smash that subscribe button, go ahead and hit the like button and share button. And of course, we would like for you to follow us at Writer Parachute on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and now on TikTok. So we hope that you enjoyed the interviews that we're bringing you. And of course, we would love for you to be a regular subscriber and to tell your friends about all the interesting interviews and tips that we offer here on the Writer's Parachute. So to start off, we're going to talk about our topic of the day. And as normal for the last few weeks, we've been talking about specific writing tips and ideas. So last week we talked about dialogue and the difference between dialogue and conversation. So I'm going to continue on with that theme and talk about dialogue tags. Now, I see as an editor, as a writer, as a writing coach, that this is one of those areas that people struggle with a lot. Some people believe that it should be just said. He said, she said, they said. While that serves its purpose, I hear a lot of the adverbs and the adjectives come into these dialogue tags. Like she said quietly. Well, how do we talk quietly? We generally whisper or gasp or mutter or do something of that nature. So think about your word choices. If you have a dialogue tag that includes an ly word, I want you to think about whether or not you're using the right word. And also another thing that I prefer to use in my writing and that I recommend, because it does give you some variety, is to remember that when we're talking, we're never still. I'm not still. I'm moving around. My hands are moving around, even though you can't see them. And oftentimes I have to sit on them. But I make facial expressions, my head moves, I do things. And oftentimes those are very telling in what the conversation is about. If somebody is avoiding eye contact, then the conversation takes on a very different tone than if somebody is staring you directly in the eye. So I want you to remember that you don't necessarily lead a dialogue tag. You can replace it with action. What is the character doing? Are they fiddling with something on the table? Are they straightening the curtains? Are they pacing around, pulling their hair? Think about what you want the character to be doing and see if that is a good replacement. Now, I don't expect you to go through and replace every said or every dialogue tag, but I want you to think about a variety of them in your writing. I hope that helps you today and you like our topic. Please leave me a comment about what you think your favorite use of a dialogue tag is, and if you like my tip today. So we're going to move on with the show. And of course, we want to welcome to the Writer's Parachute, Carmen Micsa. She is a author, and she is going to be talking about her two books, Morsels of Love and PR, the Poetics of Running. Carmen is a creative nonfiction and poet who has earned both a BA and an MA degree in English from Sacramento State University. She is also a broker CEO of her own company, Dynamic Real Estate. Micsa has published creative nonfiction, a tennis book, Change Your Grip on Life Through Tennis, and her two poetry books, The Poetics of Running, a book of poetry in motion, and Morsels of Love, a book of poetry in short form. She's now working on her memoir about fighting in the 1989 revolution and the lessons she learned growing up in communism. Micsa is also an avid marathon runner who ran 14 marathons, including London, Boston, New York, and Chicago. She lives here in Sacramento with her husband, her two teenage children, and her pet bunny. So welcome to the Writer's Parachute. Carmen, how are you today?
Oh my gosh, Dana, thank you so much for having me. I am deeply honored, and I've been looking forward to it. I've been looking at the calendar like a kid, checking the Christmas tree, And I am doing great. Thank you so much. As a matter of fact, I raced this morning. I did a 5K race and I PR'd. So the PR matches with the book.
Awesome. Well, I have been so looking forward to this interview. It's not often that I get to interview somebody who has such a vast variety of information and writing, but also a poet. For some reason, poets don't like to be interviewed, but I'm so glad that you are here. And, you've written several books and you publish regularly on Medium and a couple of other online platforms. So how did you start your writing journey, and why out on these platforms, and why do you think it's important to get the writing out to people in this way?
Yes, great question, Dana. I basically started my running journey when I was about 10 years old back in Romania. I started actually with poetry, and then I moved to fiction, and I won a big award. And they sent me to a literary camp with the top writers in the country. And it was really fun. And the whole high school, they're like, wow, Carmen is going to this camp with all these amazing writers, right? So it was a great honor. And then we came to America, my husband and I started writing my memoir. And then I went back to school to get my master's degree in English. And of course, I had to write a lot. And I was like, okay, my memoir will be my thesis. But I finished school and I wasn't happy with the memoir. You know how it is with us writers.
Yes, I do. It's like,
And then to answer your question, really the pandemic hit. I became a runner. Well, I became a runner before the pandemic. And when I became a runner, I also became a poet, which is really transcendental almost, because I was running and all these verses and rhymes were coming into my head, and I would rush back home and I would literally write the poem in 2 minutes, because it was like simmering in my brain as I was stepping and running and being outdoors. And I was like, every time I go for a run, I should run and also write a poem. So that's how it started. Mm-hmm. And because at first I wasn't as consistent and as dedicated, the Poetics of Running took 3 years, right? Mm-hmm. Because I was like, well, I don't need to write every day. It's only when I get inspired on an amazing run, right? And we know that's not the way to do it. Now I know, right? Mm-hmm. And Morsels of Love, I put it together in 3 months, 3 years versus 3 months, right? Mm-hmm. Because like you were saying, I started to write on Medium. Basically, I've been writing on Medium exactly 1 year. One of my great friends, who's also an anchor, and she has a podcast, Deetra, she told me, Carmen, why don't you start writing on Medium? And I'm like, okay. So I started writing on Medium, and I kept writing, and then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not going to finish my memoir this year. That was last year, but I have a second poetry book, right? So I'm like, let's get it out in the world. It's ready to go. And not only did I do poetry in this second one, I did short form, mm-hmm. which is 150 words or less, like little cute short stories, and some of them are memoir type in, like in 150 words. Others are just plain funny. Mm-hmm. But it was just I had so much fun, and I was looking forward to write every day because it was an instant gratification, Dana. The editors were like, congratulations, we accepted your piece. And I kept getting those. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you literally feel like, wow, you're validated, you're seen as an author, you're appreciated. And then it was like an unbelievable feeling. And it was literally what I call my healthy obsession. The writing and running, they're two healthy obsessions, right?
Well, and And honestly, I think that they're probably the marriage made in heaven because, when you're running, you're being physical, which is, elevating the endorphins and stuff like that, which we know kind of triggers the creative part of your brain. And for you as a poet writing, the rhythm of running gives you that rhythm that you guys need with writing poetry. There is a pentameter that you guys have to stay with, and I know I understand the mechanics of writing poetry, although I'm not good at it. So, but I do applaud you, and I think that they are a good marriage for you. Obviously, they're producing just a multitude of work here that's very interesting and very uplifting. So I appreciate that. So you most recently published the book Morsels of Love, a book of poetry in short form, and it seems to be your first love in writing with poetry. So, and then you sort of have a unique take on how that poetry can create happiness. So can you talk to us about that?
Yes. I this year in April, as you know, it was Poetry Month, and I sat down and wrote an essay on Medium, and it was entitled Five Reasons Poetry Helps Us Become Better and Happier Human Beings, right?
Mhm.
And the short gist of it is that poetry teaches us to live in the now with joy and gratitude. It also helps us hone our observation skills. So no matter what kind of writing you do, even if you write bad poetry, you are forced to really narrow down and zoom in the details, right?
Mhm.
And then I also think poetry helps us get rid of preconceived ideas. We always come thinking that, oh, I'm just going to write about this and everybody will love it, or I know all about this. And the reality is, we don't know until we really sit down with a page and we explore it. And about preconceived ideas, I have a great Zen story.
Mhm.
Nan-in, a Japanese master during the Meiji era, received a university professor who came to inquire about Zen. Nan-in served tea. He poured his visitor's cup full and then kept on pouring. The professor watched the cup overflow until he no longer could restrain himself. It's overfull. No more will go in. Like this cup, Nain said, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? It's it's the same for any kind of writing we do, whether it's poetry, whether it's fiction, whether it's children's books, right?
Mhm.
Because every time we sit down with a new idea, we can just say, oh, I'm a master at this. I'm going to knock it out of the ballpark, right?
Right. Right. Well, and it gives, brings up a very good point. I do see this a lot where people are so steadfast to their idea and they don't think about who is going to be reading that and what it is that they are looking for. You do have to write to your audience. I mean, you obviously don't want to give up your own thoughts and ideas, and you still have your own voice, but you really do need to think about who is reading it and how they would accept that information. It's like a lot of times if you come on very hard and fast, that then you're tending to you know push away your audience members, whereas if you come in a little softer, a lot of times they will immerse themselves in what you're saying and listen. So it's a very good point. You do have to be willing to take it from someone else's perspective and not present yourself as the ultimate authority on anything, because I'm a former teacher, and my personal um, motto is that you should probably try to learn something new every day. I try to do learn something new every day because I can't know everything. I can't
Yes.
be the ultimate expert. There is always going to be somebody out there that knows a little bit more than me or knows it in a different way. So that's a very good point. So you do talk about in your writing a lot that it's more about your own life and your own personal experience. Why was that important and meaningful to you to put yourself in this poetry?
Yes, I mean, because it literally informed my poetry, like everything that was happening around me. You know what is said about poetry, that you take the most insignificant detail and you make it significant, right?
Mhm.
So when you're able to analyze those things and notice them on a different poetic level, like they are very plain in the beginning, but then they're a quite poetic level they become, which is why I like to say that poetry helped me lift the foggy veil that covered my eyes before. Poetry honed my observation skills better than any knife sharpener. Poetry gave me new eyes to really see, you know, and and it was really easy for me to just honestly describe what was I going through in my poetry, you
Mhm.
know. And so that's why I use my own life, and I also use pieces of my, childhood and things like that,
Mhm.
just transcribed in poetry, in articles. And so yes.
Right. And I do love that because I think that writing from your own experience, while you can research about topics that you're not 100% knowledgeable about, but you have to put a bit of yourself in it because that's the authentic voice that you have. You are the sum of all the things that you have done and experienced. So I think that's it's really important for all writers to kind of take that perspective that, am I in this?
Yes,
And
because the reality is you could write a science fiction and you're still gonna inspire yourself from real life, something that happened, but you're just turning your, imagination and,
Mhm,
and doing your writing. But
mhm.
as we know, most writers actually get inspired from their own lives, their own experiences, but sometimes they present it in a fictional manner, right?
Yes,
Like,
yes, and that honestly, that gives you the best fiction if you were taking something from real life and kind of twisting it and turning it and going, down the path of what if. I did a writing group one time and I told people, that for me, what I do is I take an idea and I take it as far as I can into absurdity. And then I move back about 3 steps and I'm usually perfect.
oh my gosh, I love that, Dana. I'm going to quote you.
Well, you do that. So in addition to writing, you're a real estate broker, you're an avid reader, and you're also this marathon runner. And you just pinned a piece for Dancing Elephant Press titled "Running: My Meditation in Motion." So why was that an important topic to share? I mean, meditation and running, they don't really seem like they would go together.
Yes, but believe it or not, they really, really do, because with every step that we take, we have to have the right breath matching our steps, our strides, okay? And my friends sometimes joke with me because I'm a very high energy person. They're like, we don't see you do yoga, Carmen. I do yoga. If I have to, I do it. But I discovered that when I run, it is so easy to meditate. And I'm not the only one, actually, Dana. Most of my runner friends, they're like, sometimes because we run together a lot, but they say sometimes I want to run by myself to really think and meditate, right? And I discovered that, and it was like really uplifting because, as I said, I would be in the middle of a run. It literally happened last year. We had the worst storm like in 100 years in Sacramento. And
Mhm.
the day before, there was supposed to be a big Ironman race, and it got canceled. And I was doing my run. The next day was gorgeous, Dana, and I felt bad for my friends who were supposed to compete. But
Mhm.
I'm out here on this run, and all of a sudden, stuck on the sidewalk, there was the most beautiful display of autumn leaves. All
Mhm.
colors like ruby, gold, yellow. And I stop. I take a picture, and I immediately go home, and I can read a little bit from it. It's one of my favorite poems. I wrote it down, I'm not kidding, in 5 minutes. It's called Autumn Bandages. This is the picture of the leaves, right? That I took during my run. And then I said, stricken with grief, levitating leaves coalesce in their free fall and turn into autumn bandages, mending mankind of every kind. Stickers of stolen joy peeled from their luscious lights, fall leaves kiss the damp ground after a sudden storm, mending mankind of every kind. And the poem is a little longer, but the idea is that without me being mindful, and I was in a meditation state, but I immediately stopped my run and I pulled my phone out and I took the picture,
Right. I love that. And I do talk about this. And I think what you're hitting with your meditation and running is what a lot of us as writers do when, especially fiction writers, when we're trying to plot out our book. It's like a lot of times I will be doing laundry or dishes or working out at the gym or gardening and stuff like that. And that's when, I have those aha moments. And I love the idea that you pulled out your phone, because that's exactly what I do. Is like I have, a voice recording app that I like to use. And a lot of times I'll just turn it on. And while I'm fiddling around, I will, record my notes. And I always find that I have the best ideas when I'm doing something else. I just find that fascinating. And I think part of it is that we get in our own way a little bit. We think too hard, whereas with, when our mind is more active with something physical, then some of those barriers come down. So I think that's an amazing idea. And I really never thought about that merging with running, but it makes sense now that you've explained that. So you've also offered some tips for children and adults in becoming better writers. So what would be your top 3?
Yes. Because I myself started to recreate myself basically as a writer, and I started to write before my first poetry book had straight 3-verse poetry. In the second poetry book, I did haiku, I did tankas. So my tips are the following. Number 1 is write short at first, because when you write short, it's not daunting. It's not like if you were to say, Carmen, send me 100-page for this podcast, I'll be like, okay, Donna. So when you write short at first, what I call little morsels of love, right? Whether they're poems, whether they're 6-word stories, whether it's a short form piece or haiku, number 1, what it does, it's not daunting, like I said, and it improves your economy of writing. Number 2 tip is consistency. I told you I was struggling with it before because I was always making the excuse, well, I'm too busy with my real estate. I'm too busy with the kids. I can't write every day. But the reality is that we can. And when we're consistent, it's like running where you get into that consistent flow. Your writing will flow like a river and will bring less stress about your writing because you are trained, right? You're not out of breath as a runner. You don't get out of breath because you're trained. As a writer, you don't get out of ideas because you're trained, right?
Great.
And number 3, which is very meaningful for me, because when I studied English at the university in Romania, we used to read about 100 books a year. And these were serious books like, all the universal literature, all the classics. So my best tip is we always hear people saying, read anything you can, read books. Take it a little step further and read books that will also help you improve your vocabularies as a writer. It's not just about reading anything. It's about reading something, number 1, that will teach you something, and number 2, that is beautifully written and it will inspire you to be more creative with your images, right? Mm-hmm. And I say that to my kids too. For instance, I was supposed to run Tokyo Marathon in 2020 before the pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. And both my daughter and I read a beautiful book. It's called I Love You So Mochi. It's
Mhm.
about a Japanese American girl who goes to, for the first time, to visit her grandparents in Japan.
Mhm.
And it was just so beautifully written. And we also accomplished two things: beautifully written, and we learned a lot about the, you know, things to do and things not to do in Japan, right?
Right.
And so that, to me, and of course, as a writer, we need to learn how to read as writers. We transcend, like, oh, I understand the plot in Carmen's story. We transcend that by saying, oh, I see what kind of images she uses here. She really likes alliterations, because if you
Mhm.
read my poems, I use a lot of alliterations, right?
Right.
And or like different things, and then you become a better writer yourself because you read high quality literature and books.
Right. And I'm just going to add a few things to this. I think these are amazing tips. And I would say, just the fact that you're writing every day, what that is it's like if you're a painter, if you're a dancer, if you're a, runner, you have to apply that skill on a daily basis to get better, to improve. It is a craft. Writing is a craft. Most people know how to write, but to write well, you have to work at that craft. You have to write bad things to write good things. And by extension, this reading, reading for a purpose and looking at how other people use the writing craft is very valuable to teach you different ways and to spark ideas and new ways of approaching the same subject. So I think these are excellent ideas and I really appreciate you sharing those with our audience. So you mentioned before that you struggled a little bit in the beginning with your memoir and your thesis. So what do you think were the obstacles that prevented you from succeeding, and what is it that you think that you learned since then?
Yes, I I think I was more of a perfectionist then than I am now. Now I understand that, okay, I already edited this story 5 times and everything seems to be good. I'm gonna, send it out into the world. Whereas at that time, I was like, this is not good enough. This is not good enough. And I would just put the brakes on my creative process,
Mhm.
and I would talk myself out of writing as well. I would make excuses, right?
Mhm.
Um, and even with the first book, the Change Your Grip on Life Through Tennis, um, it also took me about 2 years to write and publish, because I also had other unknowns. I decided to have my own publishing company. And so I had other unknowns, like, how do I get it out into the world? Luckily, that's another reason to get a master's degree or higher education. One of my best friends from our master's degree, she already had figured this out. So she helped me with that whole process, right?
Right.
Her name is Jenny. She's a great novelist. And luckily, once I figured out that she can help me, then I constantly kept on writing, and I hired an editor who was also a tennis player, right?
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, you have everything in place now. Stop making excuses and get this book out.
Right. And that is so true. And it's like, I talk about this a lot when I'm, doing writers groups. It's like, writing, it seems very isolating and very singular. Um, but when you're going from a writer to publishing a book, you have to have a team around you because you can't possibly know all the current information or the ins and outs of every single step, nor do you want to, because you would just spend your life learning all of these things rather than writing. So yeah, it's very important. And I'm glad that you were able to find a team around you. So you did create this Wistful Press
Yes.
as your publishing company. So you said that was an important step to you in your process. So why was it important for you to publish under your own publishing company and
Yes.
become an independent author?
I think it was important because I'm not that patient to wait 2 years for a publishing company to say, okay, your book is coming out. And I also had a little bit of a niche market, like the tennis, right? If you are not into tennis at all, you probably won't read that book, although it's really for anyone who enjoys fitness, right? But because I realized it's more of a niche, and even poetry, I was like, this is the normal step that I really need to take. And of course, my friend also said, well, I have my own. You can just publish yourself, and you can just get it going. It's really easy. And I had another friend who worked on the logo for the publishing company, and I realized that that was a little better for me because I didn't want to just start this whole process of, with the memoir, I might do it where I go traditional way, you see. But like with poetry and something as specific as tennis, I felt like that was the natural way to go.
Right. And yeah, and again, I talk a lot with people about the difference. It's like most people don't understand that when you're going the route with traditional publishing, that there is a big waiting period. I mean, you generally have to go through a querying process to try and find an agent, because generally you have to be represented by an agent to be able to go with one of the big publishers, and then they have to shop for a publisher who will publish your book. And then generally, because of their calendaring and everything like that, it usually takes 18 months to 2 years from that point, which, it may take you a year or better to query to find a literary agent. It may take them 6 months to a year to find you a publisher. And then again, 2 years on top of that. So yeah, it is a long, daunting task. But again, the thing most people like about that is because once that happens, and they can just hand off the book and they can just move on to writing the next thing. Whereas if you're self-published, a lot of people ask me, well, why would I self-publish, or why would I go traditional publishing? And honestly, I feel like the answer is, how much work do you want to do? How much control do you want to have over every step? And so, and again, yes, with niche audiences, it's really hard, and it will probably extend that querying process for a lot longer. So I think that's probably the best thing for you. And you bring up a very good point. Just because you do self-publish or independently publish does not exclude you from going with a traditional publisher with your next book or your next project. So I think that's amazing. So I'm going to have some speed questions here for you.
Yes.
So what advice would you give your younger self if you could talk to you?
Yes. I think the best advice I would give myself is to don't think twice before you do something, and don't give up when things get really tough. Because the reality is, when you get there to the really hard moments and the tough moments, you're almost done. And I can tell you, many of our teachers back in Romania, they used to tell us, don't be like the person who gets drowned right by the shore.
Right.
See, it's like we don't even realize sometimes how deep we are into a project or into a goal or into a dream. And we're like, oh, this is too hard. And this happened to me, Donna, just like a month ago. I'm also writing on Newsbreak, and you have to have 100 followers. And it seemed like it took forever. So I had one day when I said, I am done. I'm not going to write anymore. And then I wrote a bunch of stories, and they went like 200,000 views. They went viral, and it was so easy to gain the next followers. But it's human nature that when things get really tough or hard, or, we want to switch and do something else, or like give it up. So I would say, don't. I was pretty strong as a kid. I usually didn't give up easily, but I would just say that is such important advice for anyone, like from kids to adults. Because when things get difficult, that's when it's almost over.
Right. Yes. I had a coach tell me one time, it's like, the moment when you are ready to break is when you have your breakthrough.
Oh, I love that.
So, and I think that's true. A lot of times I think, we don't know how strong we are or how far we can be pushed. But, sometimes I think the universe does know that. And so it does feel like pushing you so that you grow. And that, to me, the harder you struggle, the more indelible that lesson is. Whatever
Absolutely.
you needed to learn at that moment becomes the thing that you will always remember. And, I talk about this, I tell people you don't learn things from being perfect. You learn things from messing up, from making mistakes, from tripping up and going around obstacles. And that's, I think we get lost in this idea that we need to be perfect or we need to do it right the first time. And I remind people, when you stood up to walk as a child, you didn't walk or run the first day. It took a while. So we have to approach most things that way. So what advice would you offer to new or upcoming authors and writers?
Yes. I actually have discovered during this pandemic that every time I would get stuck, I would go to the grocery store and I would talk. I would talk to the cashier or I would talk to someone in line, but don't be creepy, okay? And I wrote about 4 or 5 stories from my going to the grocery store because like like we were a little isolated and I literally needed the need to talk to other people than my household, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes, I have teenage kids and I say something and they're like, cool, mom, and the conversation is over. Cool, right? And so number one is like you really need to get out of your house, right?
Mhm.
And then number two is for me, and I notice I talk to other writers, even who are not runners, they go for walks or hikes. When we're out in nature and we go out and explore, ideas will literally flow into our minds and we come back to the writing desk and we're like, okay, now I know which direction I'm going with this article, with this memoir, with this chapter. Like I feel that we can't just be stuck on our chairs. We have to go out into the world and experience the sounds, the smells, like everything, because then it's going to be so easy to put it in your novel or poetry or anything.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. I mean, as I said before, writing can be an isolating business, but think about other ways that you can improve your writing. And you're right, going out into nature, going out into the world. And I'm going to add to that, there are a lot of writing groups. I host 2 a week and a big long one, once or twice a month. And I find that, again and again, I hear from my writers saying that even on a Zoom call, they at least feel that camaraderie and they feel like they're able to accomplish more because it almost works as an accountability issue. But again, they also have the conversation so you aren't so stuck in your own head. So yeah, I mean, it's like I tell people if you can't get out in public or you don't want to get out in public or you don't want to talk about it in public, then try to find at least somebody that can be an accountability partner to you that you can just call up and say, hey, I'm just really messing up here or I'm struggling with this. It's like, can I read it to you and see what you think? That sort of thing. Because oftentimes that's the most helpful. And I really do like your advice because it's really important that we are whole writers. We can't be locked in a room and expect to have a realistic view of the world if we're not in it.
And sometimes, as we know, we writers are pretty nosy people. So we
Yes.
eavesdrop amazing dialogue. You were talking about dialogue. And a lot of times it's hard to know how teenagers nowadays talk, right? So you overhear that and you're like, that was a beautiful piece of dialogue. I'm going to insert it in one of my pieces,
I have to tell you, one of my things I do a lot of times is I will just go to a coffee shop to write just for a change of pace, change of scenery. And oftentimes I will keep a notebook beside me because you overhear conversations. And I always find it funny how I pick up pieces of conversation that eventually will get morphed and changed a little bit into dialogue in one of my books. And it's really a good tool and a good habit to be into, especially if you're out by yourself, is to write down snippets of that conversation and dialogue. And you're right, with teenagers, it's particularly difficult, but also with all different ages and cultures, and especially, talking about dialogue, we see this a lot where somebody is trying to bring across a different culture, or someone such as you that has, a little bit of an accent still. And it's really hard to write that without making you sound like an idiot. and so I tell people, it's like, go listen to how they talk, because it isn't them not being smart, it's their word choices and the rhythm of their language, which is probably very important to you as a poet, is the rhythm of the language and the words that they choose. It isn't necessarily how they're talking or they're speaking. And like I said, I just really don't like some of these the use of some of these idioms about how somebody from the South speaks, or somebody from a foreign country speaks. It's like, go out and listen. You're going to hear, and you're going to make that person or that character more realistic and alive than you would. And on the other side of it, when people write that way, when they write dialogue with that, it's very difficult to read, because you're just like going, I don't understand what the information is they're trying to give me here. So
Yeah.
I think that's excellent advice. Be out in the world. So
And ask questions and then listen. Like,
yes.
the better we are at asking questions, like my kids are funny. They're like, oh my gosh, Mom, you talk to every stranger you meet. Because I just, I have this joy of like giving compliments to people, genuine compliments, and then striking up a conversation. And you're always amazed what you learn from people, even in a 2-minute span that you're standing in line together,
Right. Well, and my family laughs at me because I always say I've not yet met a stranger. I'm waiting for that phenomenon to happen, because I like talking to people, and it's just, I think that's what we as writers do. We're trying to reflect what we see and feel in life, and that's really important. And to be able to do that, you have to get out there where life is, and be able to observe it and interpret it. So yeah, this is a very good topic that we're talking about. So where can we find your books? Because I definitely want to send readers and listeners out there to grab your books. I have my copies here behind me,
Yes.
and I just got those in this morning, so I've had just about enough time to flip through and
Yes.
skim here and there, but they are really great. I read a bunch of her stuff that she has up on Medium, and up on also the it was Newsbreak, yes. And so and then she also has the stuff up for the Dancing Elephant Press.
Yes.
So those are very well written. So I'm very excited to read these books behind me. But where can we find them?
Yes. So this year I actually got a professional author website. One of my runner friends helped me teach. She did the whole website. And it's carmenmicsabooks.com. So www.carmenmicsa books.com. And of course, I am on Amazon, and I know you'll include the links. I'm on Amazon, I'm on Barnes and Nobles, and all the books are both in ebook and print edition. And those are the main places you can purchase my book. And if anyone wants an autographed copy, then they can go to my website and say that, and I will mail it to them,
All right, great. Well, this is a good time for me to remind everybody that we will have the links to everything that Carmen is mentioning here, her website and her book links on Amazon, and mentioning some of the other platforms that she has in the show notes. So be sure to go check those out and grab a copy of one of her books. We have, the Morsels of Love and PR, the Poetics of Running. We want you to go check those out, and also check out her other work on Medium. So where can listeners find more about you and your books? That would also be at your website, or do you have a separate calendar somewhere?
No, the website will be the best because everything is set up nicely. From the website, they can also go to Medium and see my articles. And all the information is there, carmenmixabooks.com.
Okay, great.
And of course, they can connect with me on all social media. So Carmen Micsa on Facebook, the same on Instagram. Twitter is C Micsa. So yes, I am very active on social media. You know, you're going to see my running posts. You're going to see my rap songs. I became a rapper during the pandemic, you know. And, you know, I just, it's just really funny. All of a sudden, I started doing so much during the pandemic, which most people told me I'm the opposite of what happened to everyone else, you know.
Well, you know, you're a person after my own heart. It's like I don't want to say glad of what was going on, but I was glad for the time and the energy to really be focused in on what it was that I wanted to do. It kind of took some of the extraneous things going on in my life about being here, being there, and you know, and all of that stuff. It's gonna, you know, when you're niched down to just being home and you know, on the computer, it's like it really did kind of advance my ability to write and coach and stuff like that. So I'm with you on it. It was actually a good thing for me too. So we also wanted to talk about, you have a summer challenge for
Yes.
listeners. Now this is a special challenge for our listeners here. So we're going to ask her to tell us what it's about, how you can enter, and what you'll get.
Yes, absolutely. So I feel that anyone can write the haiku, right? You know, 575, the syllables. So I want to encourage our listeners to write their own haiku this summer. First, buy my Morsels of Love. You will see different haikus and even tanka and different forms. Either buy the Morsels of Love or the PR, the Poetics of Running, which is on sale on Amazon. And what you do in the challenge is post your haiku and tag the writer Parachute and tag me. And if you want, also post a picture of my book. And by doing that, by tagging the podcast and myself and Donna, you will be entered into a drawing to receive a free critique from me of a poem, one page of fiction or nonfiction, because I have also worked as an editor in my previous life. and I'm very happy to give constructive feedback. I'm really good about editing and like seeing what's going on. So that is the grand prize, where you get to have one page critique, you know, give me your best, and or like even half an hour consultation, like say, I want to do what you're doing. How do I go about it? You know, but like I said, tag writer Parachute, tag Donna, tag myself after you bought one of the books or all the books. You know, the more the better. and then we keep this open through the whole summer. So we start to, you know, when the podcast goes live, and let's go all the way till the first day of fall.
All right. Well, that's very exciting. And of course, she's going to have more information on the website, and we will try to add as much information as we can to the show notes. We are limited there, but we will refer you to her website, which is Carmen Micsa books.com. So we want to talk to you about that. So basically the highlights are, you go buy one of her books, you write a haiku, and you either take a photo of her book or a photo of your haiku and post it on any social media, tag Carmen at one of her social media accounts, or you can tag the Writer's Parachute at Writer Parachute without an S. And then you'll be in the drawing for a consultation with her and a one-page critique of your work. So that's very exciting. If you're an upcoming writer or poet, then this is an excellent opportunity to talk with someone who knows and that can get you going in the right direction. So do take advantage of this summer of haiku that we're going to be offering you as a challenge. And I thank Carmen for being here And of course, we want to make sure that you go and follow Carmen on all of her social media accounts. We also want you to go check out her website and get more information. Please do go check out her work on Medium and on Newsbreak, and also on Dancing Elephant Press, as well as going over to either Amazon or Barnes & Noble or one of your favorite book retailers and grabbing her books, which are Morsels of Love and PR, the Poetics. I don't know why I keep saying that one, the Poetics of Running. So we thank you, Carmen, for being here, but go ahead and stick around for a minute, because we are now going to pull the ripcord on another tip of the week.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great honor and pleasure.
Well, just stick around, because we're just going to pull this ripcord on this tip, and then we'll be back to say goodbye. So Carmen mentioned that she had some problems with procrastination, with perfectionism, with the enoughs, and consistency. So we're going to address that today in today's tip. So she talked a little bit about the fact that her consistency and procrastination were mostly because she had not created a writing habit. Now, we've talked about this before, about creating a writing habit, a writing schedule. Now, I'm not steadfast in believing that you have to write every day. It is better if you do write every day, but I do understand life happens. People have lives, they have things going on. So if you can get 10 to 15 minutes a day writing, that's all that you need to dedicate, then I think you will find that consistency will improve. And it also helps to get rid of that procrastination, because all you're looking at is a 10 to 15 minute time. Also, I think a lot of times when people get themselves into trouble with the enoughs and the procrastination and the consistency, is trying to set a too high goal. Now, I've talked about this before. What I would say is, yes, you may be able to write 5,000 words a day, and you may be able to do that for a very long time, but there is going to come a day when you're not. Things happen, sometimes the words are, you're yanking them out one syllable at a time. And it's really hard to hit those high goals. So what I say, if you're going to set yourself goals to keep consistency and keep the perfectionism and the enoughs at bay, is to set the lowest goal that you're willing to accept. If that's a paragraph, a sentence, 100 words, 500 words, then set that low goal, because what will happen is you're going to sail past it every single day. And then when you have those bad days, it isn't such a large mountain to climb. Beyond that, talking about enoughs oftentimes is about us comparing ourselves to other people. And it's really difficult in a very public way. When you become a published author, you are a public figure. And so you do hear a lot of the criticism, and you do see a lot of the comparison between you and other writers out there. And what I have to say is that try not to compare yourself to anyone's journey, because you don't know what they're going through. You don't know how many years they spent before that book came out working to create their craft, or if, because I know that nobody becomes an overnight sensation. It does take work. Some people will do the work beforehand and then not publish until they feel that they're fully ready. Other people are more like me. I'm willing to go jump off that cliff and learn as I go and figure it out. And I'm okay with that. But it's really hard to see other people succeeding when you're not. And I just think that you have to look at why it is you feel like you're not succeeding. If you are not meeting your goals, then I think that says more about maybe your goals or what you're doing to achieve those goals. Don't borrow other people's goals. Don't borrow other people's journeys. It's not yours. Find your own. Find what it is that you want to get and keep working towards that. If you keep your eyes on your own prize, then you won't worry about anybody else's. So that's pretty much what I have to say about that. I hope that you can put the enoughs in the closet and realize that there is somebody somewhere waiting for your words specifically. So You are enough. And consistency comes with practice. Procrastination comes with schedules and habits. And perfectionism is kind of a myth. As I said earlier, you don't learn anything from being perfect. In my own journey, I have mistakes in my books, and I've had people point them out to me, and they're like, well, why don't you fix these? And I'm like, well, for me, I prefer my readers to go on the journey with me. I want them to see that my writing is improving, that I am not perfect, that I do make mistakes, that I am willing to be out in the world, all warts and all, and it's just who I am. And it takes some pressure off of me that I don't have to worry about being perfect. I just have to worry about being a little bit better each time. And that does change my outlook on how I approach writing, how I approach publishing, and how I think about my writing overall and my success as a writer. So I hope that's helpful for you. And again, we want to thank Carmen Micsa for joining us today and talking to us about her books and about poetry and about running through life with joy. So I hope you guys come back next time. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Follow us at Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and now on TikTok at Writer Parachute. That's Writer Parachute with no S. So thanks for being here, Carmen. I hope we get to have you come back when your new memoir is out.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, a joy, and a great honor.
You're very welcome. Until next time, we're going to leave you here, and we hope that all of your writing dreams land well. Bye.